Alright guys, we're going to do the heart today. Well, more today. Alright, so this is the heart muscle. This is the heart model that we had that I really like. This is the best one, but just so you guys are aware, there are some crappy ones. So this is one. So this is the exact same thing as this, just a little bit smaller, and it looks a little bit funny, but it is really the exact same thing. So just try to use like the blood vessels to kind of get you oriented. So here you can see you have your right coronary artery, left coronary artery, left coronary artery. The aorta should be coming up and wrapping around. So here, then you have a blue one here, blue one here, blue one here, blue one here. So see, they're the same thing. So don't let that confuse you. Same thing here. So you still got your aorta, your superior vena cava, and then your pulmonary trunk, same order that these guys are in. So use that to help you with this crappy model. And then this one, same story. So use the blood vessels, and then use the right and left coronary arteries so you know you're in the front. Always look for the pulmonary trunk. That's how you know you're in the front. Because if you're looking at the back, you can't see that. Alright, so we're going to use this one just because it's the nicest. But please know them on those. They'll probably be on the practical with you guys' luck. Alright, so here we go. So the first thing we need to decide is what side of the heart is right side, which side is left side. So remember, it's always in relation to the person. So if this heart was inside somebody's chest, what would it look like? Not how we're looking at it. Because according to us, this would be right side, this would be left side. It's actually just the opposite. Sitting in my chest, this is my right side, this is my left side. So if I put it like this, see? Right side, left side. So the right side is the blue side. The orange side is the left side. So on the right side, we basically have 4 chambers to a heart. The upper chambers are called atria, and the lower chambers are called ventricles. So this is going to be the right atrium, this is going to be the left atrium, this is going to be the right ventricle, this is going to be the left ventricle. So if we open it up, we can actually see the spaces inside. So this again is going to be your right atrium here, this big space. Your left atrium is going to be this big open space. Your right ventricle is going to be this space, and your left ventricle is going to be this big space here. So those are the ventricles and the atria. Valves. So valves are like little one-way doorways to let blood only flow in one direction. So what happens is when your, let's say your right ventricle constricts down, it kind of squeezes when it contracts, you're going to have 2 valves that either open or close. So this valve here is going to close off while this valve here is going to open up. This valve here leads to this thing called a pulmonary trunk. So this is going to be the pulmonary trunk. So this is going to be your pulmonary semilunar valve. So just remember that the little valve at the beginning of the pulmonary trunk is the pulmonary semilunar valve. Makes life really easy. This big red tube here is going to be your aorta. So if we look at where the aorta begins, it's way up in this model, hiding behind this guy. But you can see again, there's like the 3 little white cusps. That's going to be your aortic semilunar valve. So where your aorta starts is going to be the aortic semilunar. So aortic semilunar going to the aorta, pulmonary semilunar going to the pulmonary trunk. Right? The other ones that we talked about, so these ones are going to open when your ventricles contract. These ones are going to actually close. So you have one on each side. You have one on the right side, and you have one on the left side. And if you count how many little pieces are sticking off of it, you have 1, 2, 3. See how there's these little, basically connectees? So you have 62, whatever, 10, and 42. I don't know, it doesn't matter what the numbers are, but there's 1, 2, 3. This is called a tricuspid valve. It has 3 cusps, 1, 2, 3. Whereas over here, you only have 2. You have this cusp here, you have this cusp here. Bicuspid valve. Makes life really, really simple. Okay. In general, on a heart as well as other organs, you have a pointy side, which is called the apex. So this pointier side of the heart down here is going to be the apex of the heart, and where all the blood vessels come in and out, up here is going to be the base. So if you took a piece of tape and wrapped it around here, that would be your base of your heart up here. At the pointy little tip, going to be the apex. A couple other things. So the fossa ovalis, so when you're a little tiny baby, you basically have a hole in your heart on purpose to bypass your lungs. Because when you're inside your mom, you don't need to be breathing because you're not breathing anything anyways. Your mom's giving you oxygen. So there's going to be a hole, basically, that connects this atria, this number 55, over to this atria. So it's going to go straight across. But when we're an adult, this hole closes off, and it's called the fossa ovalis. So this little guy here is going to be your fossa ovalis. When you're a baby, it's your foramen ovale. So fossa ovalis is going to be number 55, this little divot here that used to be a hole. Inside of our ventricles, you have all these nice kind of rough looking little bumpies lining the walls. These bumpies have a name. It's called trabeculae carneae. So this is going to be trabeculae carneae here and here. It also is along here and along in here. So if it's a ridgy, bumpy mess of muscle in the ventricle, only in the ventricles, it's called trabeculae carneae. Coming off of our little valves, we have these little cords, these little white cords right here that I'm pulling on, that I'm plucking. So these are called chordae tendineae. It literally means heartstrings. So these are your little chordae tendineae here. These are your little chordae tendineae right here. So little chordae tendineae. And these little red little nubs that should actually be attached to the walls are going to be called papillary muscles. So you can see this little guy here is going to be a papillary muscle, papillary muscle, papillary muscle, attached to chordae tendineae, attached to a valve. And what happens basically is these guys kind of act like the strings on a kite so it doesn't fly away. They kind of hold onto the valve so it doesn't blow all the way through. They just kind of keep it so it closes off the blood so it doesn't go back up into your atria. Alrighty, the interventricular septum. Inter means between, and the septum is a divider, so that this wall right here between your two ventricles is your interventricular septum, between the two ventricles. Pectinate muscle, so we said down here, this is called trabeculae carneae, but up in the atria, or atrium, you have different kind of muscles. This is not called trabeculae carneae, it's called pectinate muscle. So this is going to be pectinate muscle here, and also pectinate muscle over here. So it's only found in the atria, the pectinate muscle. A pericardial sac, if you took a plastic bag and wrapped it around the whole heart, that would be your pericardial sac. You'll see it in the dissection of the heart, the sheep heart that we're going to do. So you'll see a pericardial sac there, but there's obviously not a model that has a pericardial sac on it. And then last but not least, again, when you're a baby, some bypass, so you don't have blood going to your lungs. You have a little connection here. And what's left over when you're an adult is a structure called your ligamentum arteriosum. So it's just a little ligament that used to connect the aorta to the pulmonary trunk. So it's going to be this little guy right here. We're going to skip the we can do conducting system. Just going right in order. The conducting system of the heart is going to be the electrical components of our heart. So what are we actually doing when it comes to electrical components in our heart? So whenever your heart beats, the beating starts in your right atrium. So there's one little tiny spot in your right atrium, number 32 right here, this little white spot, which are a bunch of little cells called pacemaker cells that actually fire off spontaneous action potentials. And what they do, what we call them is the sinoatrial node, the SA node, sinoatrial node. So they're going to shoot off an action potential, and that action potential is going to spread over both atria, and it's going to completely cover both atria, and they're going to contract. So it's going to start right here, sinoatrial node. It's going to spread over, and it's going to join back together as one single kind of impulse here at the structure, it's number 36, called the atrioventricular node. And that makes sense because it's between the atrium and the ventricle. So sinoatrial node, atrioventricular node. After that, the electrical activity travels through a structure called the atrioventricular bundle, or the bundle of His, which would go from here, right here, and wrap around the back of the heart and it'd go into the interventricular septum. I don't think it's on a model, but they might call it this first little chunk of cord right here. Once you start traveling down into the interventricular septum, it splits into a right and left piece. So you have one lining the left side, one lining the right side, and these are called the bundle branches. So you have bundle branches going down on both sides, right and left. As soon as they get to the apex of the heart and they turn around and start going back up the ventricles, we call them Purkinje fibers. So these are Purkinje fibers going up here, Purkinje fibers going up here. So just one more time. It goes SA node, electrical activity travels to the AV node, sinoatrial to atrioventricular, across the bundle of His, or atrioventricular bundle, down the bundle branches on both sides, then up the Purkinjes. That's good. That's it for electrical stuff. Now, as far as, remember, the heart is a muscle. So the heart needs its own blood supply. Even though you'd think it's a heart, it doesn't need blood, it does need blood. So what happens basically is you have a couple of branches of arteries. This coming off of your aorta, you have a little artery coming this way, and you actually have another one that's underneath your pulmonary trunk that comes this way. Remember, this is the right side of the heart. So shockingly enough, this is called the right coronary artery. So this major branch coming this way and wrapping this direction is the right coronary artery, and the one that's on the left side is called the left coronary artery. The only other things you need to know are the anterior interventricular cardiac vessels. So this is the anterior side of the heart. This is the interventricular septum. So this red blood vessel here, well, actually the blue one too, so it's just blood vessels, are going to be your anterior interventricular artery and vein. And on the back side, if we lift it up, in the back, this is going to be the interventricular septum still, but from the back side now, you have your posterior interventricular vein and artery. So it's going to be at the back side. Where all the veins join together, all these veins have names, luckily for you, you don't need to know them all, but where they all join together in this enlarged little last region that then drains into your right atrium, this little number 27, is going to be your coronary sinus. That's your coronary sinus right there. And that's it. That's the whole list. Alright, so now we're going to do the great vessels, so blood vessels basically. So we're going to start back to the model of the heart we just got done talking about. So we said that this is the aorta, so this is going to be your aorta, and this part that comes up and around is going to be the aortic arch. So basically you have your ascending aorta, this little part, the aortic arch, and then in the back it starts going down, that's going to be the descending aorta. So on other models, what does it look like? Torso. Again, aorta is here, the aortic arch is going to be this part, and in the back, actually you can't really see it because it's behind the organs, but if we get the organs out of the way, actually if we pull the heart right off too, you can see the descending aorta coming down, and then once it gets past the diaphragm, we call it the abdominal aorta, but still descending aorta down here. Heart back in. On this guy, so again, aorta's here, coming up, the aortic arch is going to be right there, and then again, it goes behind the heart. You can see the descending aorta or abdominal aorta coming down here, and then it splits, and once it splits, it gets a different name. Think about it like a tree. The trunk of the tree, then you have branches. Each branch has a name. Over here, again, aorta, aortic arch coming around, and then again you can see the descending aorta coming down here. And then this guy, he's missing his heart, but this is going to be your descending aorta or abdominal aorta coming down here, again, until it splits, then it gets a different name. That's number 1. Next one, back to the heart. Pulmonary trunk. So the pulmonary trunk, remember, is the blue guy. So the pulmonary trunk is here. As soon as he splits, he gets different names. He has one coming off this direction, and on the back side, he has one coming off in this direction. These are going to be your pulmonary arteries. You're probably thinking, Kelly, what are you talking about? Arteries are supposed to be red. No, no, no. Arteries are red because they have oxygen. These ones are arteries because they leave the heart, okay? So arteries are blood vessels where the blood actually leaves the heart. Anything that leaves the heart is going to be an artery. So as the blood gets pumped through the pulmonary trunk, it enters pulmonary arteries. The pulmonary arteries go to the lungs. So if we look on this guy, pulmonary trunk is here. The heart contracts, the blood goes through the pulmonary trunk, it splits and goes into the left pulmonary artery, and it goes into the right pulmonary artery, where it goes and picks up oxygen and returns back to the heart in a vein. On the torso, pulmonary trunk, pulmonary artery going this way, pulmonary artery going this way. Okay, pulmonary arteries. This guy, pulmonary trunk, pulmonary artery, pulmonary artery. This guy, no arteries. Okay, so now, moving on. So now we're gonna look actually at the branches that come off the aorta. So remember, we're back to the aorta here, and it has 3 branches. 1, 2, 3. The first one is going to be your brachiocephalic artery. So brachiocephalic artery is the first one. The second one is going to be your left common carotid. And then the last one is going to be your left subclavian. So it goes brachiocephalic, left common carotid, left subclavian. So those are the 3 little nubs. So now if we look at a model like this, aorta. First branch is right here, so you can see the little branch right there, brachiocephalic, which comes up and as soon as it splits, gets a different name. For now, brachiocephalic is there. Left common carotid comes up, again it splits, different names. And then the last little branch is right here, left subclavian comes up, goes under the clavicle, and it gets a different name. All right, so that's the next one. This guy, so again, you can still see the aorta. You can't really see the brachiocephalic because it's kind of covered. Maybe it's this one, but I wouldn't label it on here. But maybe this one's your brachiocephalic. That one right there, that little nub, might be your left common carotid coming up. And then this one over here that comes up and under, it's going to be your left subclavian there. So that guy doesn't have it. This one, aortic arch, brachiocephalic's here. Left common carotid is going to be this one that comes up here. And then left subclavian is the only one that comes up and wraps over here. Next one down, the right common carotid artery. So let's go. We can't go any further on the heart because it doesn't go any further. So we are out for this for now. Let's go to this guy. So our aorta, our aortic arch, our brachiocephalic artery comes up, it splits. I told you, it's different names when it splits. The branch that goes this way is going to be your right subclavian artery, whereas the branch that goes up towards your head, just like you have over here, the left common carotid, this is going to be your right common carotid. So remember, this is his right side, this is his left side. So right common carotid artery is here. Can't see it in that guy over here. Aorta, aortic arch, brachiocephalic artery comes up, right common carotid artery goes up. This is your left common carotid artery here. Then the right subclavian comes down this way under the clavicle. And in this guy, can't see it, so I'm not even going to bother. But you can see a little piece here of the left common carotid artery coming up before it goes into the head, pretty much. So we're pretty much done with this guy, and we're done with that guy. So we're going to be down to just these 2 models, which is great. All right, so our carotids. We said we have a left common carotid artery here and here. When they come up, they split. So let's just look at this one first. So our left common carotid artery comes up. You can see it splits right here. One branch stays on the outside of the skull. That's going to be your external carotid artery. So external carotid artery. Right, that's going to be, I'm just making sure it's on your actual on the list. Yep. And then the one here, the branch you can see right here where it goes in, see it right there, that little tiny branch that goes in, that's going to be your internal carotid artery that goes inside the skull and feeds the brain. Alrighty, we already did the subclavians. Vertebral artery, so not the left common carotid, but over here, you have a little artery right there. That's going to be your vertebral artery on the left side. So that's your left vertebral. You also have one on the right side, right vertebral here. This guy, again, this is going to be your your left common carotid artery coming up. The one that stays on the outside of the skull is going to be your external carotid artery, and the one that goes in and feeds the brain is going to be the internal carotid artery. This one right here is going to be your vertebral artery, right there, and over here is going to be the one that's on the other side, basically, right vertebral and left vertebral. All right, going back to the heart. So we've done arteries, now we need to do some veins. So remember, this is the pulmonary trunk, this is your aorta here. So what are these guys? There's one here, and if we actually take the heart off the stand, There's another guy here. This is going to be your superior vena cava coming up. This is going to be your inferior vena cava on the bottom. So if we look at one of the flat models now, let's put this heart back on here. Heart, pulmonary trunk, aorta, superior vena cava, it's above the heart. Inferior vena cava gets all the blood from below the heart, basically. Anything from your arms down. Over here, superior vena cava is above, inferior vena cava below. This guy, superior vena cava up here, inferior vena cava you really can't see because it's kind of behind all the guts, and you can't see it back there either, so just you can see superior on this one. Okay, now the azygous and the hemiazygous. So the only one that has both of them is going to be this guy. So your azygous is going to be this one that comes right down that runs along the actual spinal cord, and then the one that goes off to the left over here is going to be the hemiazygous, because this is going to be hemiazygous over here. So this is the only one that has your azygous and your hemiazygous on it. All right, moving along. Jugular veins, so external versus internal jugulars. It's the same story as the carotids, but now we're talking about veins. So coming off of your outside of your head, this blue one now, not the red one, is going to be the external jugular vein, whereas the one that went up into the skull is going to be the internal jugular vein. They join together just to form the common jugular vein here. I think they still call it external, even though it should be common. Here, same story over here. So external jugular, it's going to be out here. Internal jugular is the one that goes in and feeds, comes down. And then over here, I think the only one you can see a little piece of is going to be your external jugular right here. So, and then I think there's a little tiny chunk of internal jugular going into the head. I don't worry about that. All right, brachiocephalix. So now if we go back to the lovely little heart, we said this is our superior vena cava coming up. So superior vena cava has a branch, this little tiny chunk right here, and this chunk that goes all the way over before it splits. So this little piece here, and this little tiny region before the splits, this little tiny chunk, are going to be the left brachiocephalic vein and the right brachiocephalic vein. Once it splits, it gets different names. And then it turns into your jugular, and it turns into your right subclavian vein, and again over here it's going to be a jugular, and it's going to be the left subclavian vein. So these little two regions are going to be brachiocephalix. The only place you can see it is going to be on this guy. So remember, superior vena cava. This little chunk here is going to be your right brachiocephalic. This chunk right here is going to be the left brachiocephalic. It turns into a jugular, and then a subclavian. Over here, again, a jugular and a subclavian. And that is it for blood vessels. All right, guys, so this is going to be your sheep heart. So there's a couple of things you need to know on a sheep heart. We're going to start off which side is right versus which side is left. Holy crap, right? All right, so what I look for is I look for the tubes. So there's going to be a tube right here that's towards the front. This tube that's in the front, just like my fingers at an angle, is going to be your pulmonary trunk. So this is the pulmonary trunk. Remember, you can only see the pulmonary trunk from the front side. So that means this is the front of the heart. The tube behind it, right here, is going to be the aorta. So the aorta is here, pulmonary trunk is here. The aorta is a little bit thicker walled than the pulmonary trunk, so you can look at this and say, okay, it's a little bit thicker and it's straight up and down. Aorta, the one that's in the front, pulmonary trunk, which means that this is the right side of the heart, this is the left side of the heart. So if it's closed, that's how you see it. So this is going to be your right ventricle here, it's going to be your left ventricle over here. Your left atrium is going to be this gray ear looking thing here, and your right atrium is going to be this gray looking thing right here. So they're a little bit smaller. If the heart is open, how do you tell the difference? The left ventricle has a much thicker wall. So if you look at the wall on this left ventricle, see how fat it is? Whereas over here on the right side, it's much skinnier. So this is going to be your right ventricle, this space here. Your left ventricle is going to be this big space here. Again, the atria are up top. I think I cut it enough where you can see the inside of the left atrium. So this is the inside of the left atrium right here, that little space inside there, left atrium, which would have its pectinate muscle in it, if you guys remember that one. All right. So left atrium, left ventricle, right ventricle. Good. Chordae tendineae. Remember, we said those are the heart strings, right? So, in the heart model, these little strings right here and here are the chordae tendineae. Looks good. Remember where they attach to the wall of the heart? This is called papillary muscle. So this little muscle here that's holding on to this little chordae tendineae is papillary muscle. And remember, it's not the same thing as trabeculae carneae. Here, down here where it's not connected to any of those cords in the heart is trabeculae carneae. Here, it's a heart string, papillary muscle. So trabeculae carneae, papillary muscle, chordae tendineae. We have a couple of valves. So remember, on the right, this is the left side of the heart. On the left side of the heart, we have the tricuspid or the bicuspid. Well, on the left side, we have the bicuspid valve. So this valve right here, at the ends, see how it's like a big flat piece right here? This is going to be your bicuspid valve. So bicuspid valve is here. In the right side, at the ends of our little heart strings, up top, right here, we have the tricuspid valve. So tricuspid valve, maybe see a little bit more pieces of it somewhere in the direction. Kind of got blown apart a little bit. right here, there's more of it, tricuspid valve. So tricuspid valve is on the right side, bicuspid valve is on the left side. Porte tendineae, all that good stuff. Pericardium. A pericardium would look like a plastic bag on the outside of the heart. It'd be like a sheet on the outside of the heart. Pericardium, right? But it's pericardial sac. I think it's pericardium. All right. Pulmonary trunk, I said, is this one right here. If the pulmonary trunk came up, remember the pulmonary trunk comes up and it splits into pulmonary arteries. Obviously, you can't see that on here because they don't go high enough. So you can't see the pulmonary arteries or veins on this heart. You can only see the pulmonary trunk and the aorta. You don't see any of the return vessels because they just got cut off when they killed this lovely sheep. The pulmonary veins would pour back into here, but they're just not on this heart. We did the bicuspid, tricuspid. Remember, between the ventricles, this is the interventricular septum, this big chunk of muscle that's between the left and the right ventricle. Interventricular septum is here. The aortic and semilunar valves, we're gonna have to dig a little bit higher for them. Again, the aorta, all you can see is this little tiny chunk of it right here. Remember, the aorta would come up and arch over, but obviously it's not there, so you can't see the aortic arch, but this would be your aorta, this little chunk right here. So I'm gonna try to cut it so we can see the end of the aorta. Usually what I do is I stick my finger in there, if I can, get my finger down in there, and see where it pokes through. This pokes through right here. So this is the hole for your aorta. If I can get the little flap, see them way up in there? This little flap right here that I got my little probe on, see it right there, this little tiny guy I'm poking? This little teeny flap. This is actually your aortic semilunar valve. Not the same thing down here as your bicuspid, but way up in the top, there's these little flaps that are kind of tight and a pain in the butt. Let me see if I can poke it from the other direction. Open it up. Okay, shine that light in there. There we go. See how it got caught on my probe? That's going to be a aortic semilunar valve. That little thing that's caught on my probe way up in there. That little piece of, looks like a film, but it's not. It's a valve. Aortic semilunar valve way up in there. Not the same thing as the bicuspid valve. Much easier to see. The pulmonary trunk, again, what I do is I usually stick my finger down in there. I see where it comes out. So we need to be way up in this right side. So again, I'm looking for little tiny flaps that are right at the base where that blood vessel starts. I'm going to cut a little bit higher. Okay, so again, pulmonary trunk, if I stick my probe down in, you can catch the edges, right? There's one right there. That's going to be my pulmonary semilunar valve. So pulmonary semilunars are these little rubbery guys here. Again, not the same thing as the bicuspid valve, which we found over here, right? This is the bicuspid valve. Or, sorry, tricuspid, we're on the right side. Tricuspid valve is here. Semilunar valve is going to be at the end of that lovely pulmonary trunk. So it's going to be up in here, the little tiny flaps, okay? I got caught on my finger. Pulmonary semilunar. Tricuspid. Okay, that's it. Alright guys, so we're going to do the dissection of the cat for the first exam. So it's going to be basically the heart and the major blood vessels that come off the heart. So I've already opened up the chest clearly, and I wanted to show you guys the pericardial sac. It's just this kind of plastic bag that's wrapped around the heart. You can see it, it looks kind of like plastic. You have to get the pericardial sac off before you can see the heart, but this is what the pericardial sac looks like. It's got some fat on it, but this actual plasticky looking thing is the actual sac itself. So I'm going to pinch through this, pop a hole, get the fat off. This is the pericardial sac. I gotta get it off or you won't be able to see your atria and your ventricles. There's probably gonna be some coagulated blood and everything else in there, but that's okay, we got some blood. Stick my finger in there. Okay, so now we can get the heart out. So this is a heart. Clearly a lot smaller than the sheep hearts we were working with earlier. I'm just gonna kind of cut the pericardial sac back so we can see it as much as we possibly can. So it's very, very tiny, but that's okay. So obviously this is going to be the right side of the cat. Remember, it's always, or sorry, the left side. It's always in relation to the cat, not to you, or to the specimen, not to you. So this is going to be the left side of the heart here. This is going to be the right side of the heart here. You can see here, this little kind of flappy looking thing is going to be your right atrium, which means that this is going to be your right ventricle. This will be your left ventricle, and then this little guy over here would be your left atrium. So those are the major parts of the lovely heart. So if this is going to be my right ventricle, if we follow it up, there's a tube right here between the two atria, this tube that I'm squeezing. This would be the pulmonary trunk. So the pulmonary trunk, remember, goes off at an angle, just like it does in people and in sheep, it goes off at an angle. So your pulmonary trunk is right there, which means that if we just get a little bit of this fat out of the way, fat heart, this more red-shaped tube here that kind of wraps around the back is going to be your aorta. So pulmonary trunk is in the front, aorta is kind of behind it a little bit. Okay, our parts of the heart, so we already talked about the ventricles and the atria, but remember this pointy part of the heart is going to be your apex of your heart, and where all the blood vessels come in and out will be the base of the heart. On the heart you can see the little red coronary arteries, so those are going to be your little coronary arteries feeding the heart itself, because remember the heart is a muscle. Moving off of that, so we're going to start moving up. Coming off of your heart, obviously you have the aorta, but then you have a brachiocephalic artery, which is this big one right here. So the brachiocephalic artery is here, there's only one. And then it splits into the right common carotid artery and the left common carotid artery. So those are only arteries that I think you guys need to know. Oh, no, I lied to you. Then coming up over here, you actually have your left subclavian. So unlike in people where the aorta has 3 branches coming off of it, the cat only has 2. So the cat has the brachiocephalic with the common carotids coming off of it, and if you actually lift this vein out of the way, you can see there's actually another branch. You can just barely see it where it splits. See the split right there, hopefully? Where it splits into 2.
Sure.
Maybe? I want to make sure you see it. But it splits.
You can
see it? Okay, so the split, this one is going to be your right common carotid, but the other branch, the one that goes this way, and it comes off over here, is going to be your right subclavian. So it was right subclavian, right common carotid, left common carotid, all coming off of your brachiocephalic artery. And then the guy that's by himself is going to be your left subclavian. He comes over and he feeds into the arm, eventually becomes an axillary and everything else. So those are all of your lovely arteries. Now veins are going to be in blue. Remember, only time that you see red veins are going to be in the pulmonary veins, but everywhere else in the body, the veins are going to be blue, the arteries will be red. So off the heart, you have 2 major veins. So you have the superior vena cava, this big huge tube that's above the heart, and then if we lift the heart up and look underneath it, you have a big blue one down here that's going to be the inferior vena cava that goes down the rest of the body. So coming off the superior vena cava, it branches into a left and right brachiocephalic vein. So this would be your left brachiocephalic vein, this would be your right brachiocephalic vein. And then I think that is all you, oh wait, and then the other one of the veins you need to know, I don't think you even need to know subclavian veins. You don't. Well, the subclavian veins would just be this blue one over here. This would be your left subclavian vein. This would be your right subclavian vein. And the other branch, this one obviously is broken. It should be connected right here, shouldn't be broken. And then the other one is over here. This one that comes up is going to be a jugular vein. So this would be your left jugular, and this one here that's snapped would be your right jugular. And that is it for this guy.